Well, the Supreme Court has noted that the investors in Adani Group suffered losses after the short seller Hindenburg Research report and observed that there is a need to safeguard investors. Now, the top court was hearing a plea seeking an inquiry into the Hindenburg Research report on the Adani Group by a committee headed by a retired judge of the Apex Court. Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, appearing for Securities and Exchange Board of India, informed the Apex Court that the market regulator is on top of the matter.
सबसे पहला सवाल यही पूछा कि भविष्य में जो इन्वेस्टर्स हैं शेयर मार्केट में पैसा लगाते हैं, क्योंकि आजकल हर कॉमन व्यक्ति है वो शेयर मार्केट में शेयर खरीदता है, तो उनका इंटरेस्ट प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए और क्या बेहतर आप सजेशंस और क्या तरीके ला सकते हो और सेबी क्या स्टेप लेगी, क्योंकि इस तरह से जो प्रॉब्लम अचानक क्रिएट हुई है वो आगे क्रिएट होती है तो और भी ज्यादा नुकसान होता है। तो इससे बेहतर कुछ पॉलिसी मीन्स की कुछ सजेशन जिससे कि और स्ट्रेंथन किया जा सके इस मेथड को, वो आप हमारे सामने रखिए।
Well, as we see now, the Supreme Court noting that the investors in Adani Group suffered losses after the short seller Hindenburg Research report, and the Supreme Court also observing the fact that there is a need to safeguard the investors. Well, we know that the top court was hearing a plea seeking an inquiry into the Hindenburg Research report on Adani Group by a committee which was headed by a retired judge of the Apex Court. Now, Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, who was appearing for Securities and Exchange Board of India, informed the Supreme Court that the market regulator is on top of the matter. So, their Supreme Court coming in and, of course, observing the fact that there is a need to safeguard the investors, and while hearing a plea which was seeking an inquiry into the Hindenburg Research report on the Adani Group. Now, this was done by a committee which was headed by a retired judge of the Apex Court, and Tushar Mehta, who is a Solicitor General, was appearing for Securities and Exchange Board of India. He went on informing the Supreme Court that the market regulator is on top of the matter. There was a need to ensure a regulatory mechanism, which is what the Supreme Court has learned while observing and hearing this plea. And the Supreme Court, they're very well saying that the investors in the Adani Group had suffered losses. My colleague Harish joins us live on the broadcast to give us more inputs on this. Harish, take us through the inputs that you're gathering as far as the Supreme Court now noting that the investors in Adani Group have suffered losses, after the Hindenburg report was out. The Supreme Court now observing that there is a need to safeguard investors. What are the details that you're gathering on this?
Yes, in fact, as you know, two public interest litigations were filed after the Adani Group stock crashed after the publication of the Hindenburg report, which had talked about stock and share manipulation, accounting fraud and fraudulent transactions at the group. And today, Supreme Court has taken very serious view of the developments and has said that prima facie, from the petitions filed by the petitioners, it is very clear that the Indian investors have suffered losses to the tune of crores of rupees, and our immediate priority is to ensure that the interests of the Indian investors are protected, and in this direction, Supreme Court has sought the view of the centre. Remember, Solicitor General of India Tushar Mehta had appeared in this case in the courtroom. The Supreme Court bench led by D.Y. Chandrachud, the Chief Justice, said that it is mulling formation of an expert committee comprising of top officials from the security and share sector, SEBI, and international banking to evolve a fresh framework, a regulatory framework, a robust framework to ensure that such episodes does not happen in future and result in losses to the tune of crores of worth rupees to the Indian investors. So So these were some of the interim directions passed. The Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, on behalf of the centre, said that SEBI is already on the job. SEBI is already investigating. Therefore, the Supreme Court said that it should be kept it very clear in mind that we are not passing any adversarial orders. We are only trying to ensure that the interest of the Indian investors are protected. We are not casting aspersions on the functioning of any regulatory authority, including the SEBI. Very, very significant statements coming in from the Supreme Court saying that it will not delve into policy decisions, it will not question policy decisions, but its only aim is to protect the interests of the Indian investors, because these days almost everyone is into the share markets, buying shares, selling shares, and also involved in such activities. So, Supreme Court is very clear that Indian investors have suffered losses to the tune of several crores, and these are some of the observations. Let me read out for the viewers. Supreme Chief Justice said, anyways, the matter has been brought before us. How do we ensure protection of interest of Indian investors? We only want to know certain things. This is an issue of short selling. Going by the petitions, Indian investors have lost several lakh crores. How do we ensure interests of Indian investors are protected? These days, everyone is there in the stock market. We are not casting any aspersions on SEBI. We need to consider if any modifications of regulatory framework is required. We need to put in a regulatory mechanism, a robust one, to ensure that it does not happen in future. So the Solicitor General Tushar Mehta has been asked to come back to court on Monday, when the next date of hearing, on three things. Three questions from the Supreme Court bench. One, what is your view on these two PILs which have sought a probe, investigation and prosecution of the wrongdoers? Number one. Number two, whether there should be a panel to scrutinize loan demands of more than rupees 500 crores placed by corporates. Number three, what is your view regarding formation of an expert committee by this court, which comprises of top experts of the security and shares, international banking and SEBI, and whether you yourself will be forming a expert committee, or whether Supreme Court will form, or if Supreme Court is forming an expert committee, what is your input? What are your suggestions? So, in a way, Supreme Court has reiterated several times that as of now, it is not going into the demand for a probe or formation of a Supreme Court constituted SIT headed by a retired judge as sought by the public interest litigation, but only trying to bring a mechanism, for a robust mechanism to improve the present framework, so that such incidents, such episodes does not happen in future, and the interests of the Indian investors are protected. Back to you.
All right, Harish, thank you for giving us those important details on that story.